Hey guys, I've got a creepy real story to share with you, something that happened to me and my younger sister not too long ago. Honestly, I still get chills thinking about that night. I'm calling this story The Eighth Night. That day was our very first day in high school. My sister and I are only a year apart, but since our dad enrolled us in school at the same time when we were kids, we've always kind of done things side by side. For the first time ever, we were living away from our parents. Our dad had rented us a small house in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of a village. The place was peaceful, green, and cool. Right in front of the house, there was a little creek that ran by slowly, almost too quietly. At first, I was excited. The area seemed safe. The neighbors looked friendly. My sister and I went to different schools, but our schedules were pretty much the same. Around 3 p.m., we'd usually be home. We'd clean up, then cook dinner together. That day, while preparing dinner, I realized we were missing some ingredients. So I said to my sister, "Hey, I'm gonna run to the store real quick. You okay staying here by yourself?" But she immediately replied, "I'll come too. I'm bored sitting at home. Might as well meet some neighbors." So we got changed and walked over to the nearest shop, just a few minutes away from the house. On our way, we passed by a house with a lady sitting on the front porch. She called out to us, "Where are you two off to?" "Just heading to the store, ma'am. We'll be back soon," my sister said politely. "All right, take care." Her voice was warm, but I don't know. Something in her tone felt off, like she was holding back something. At the store, the owner, a woman probably in her late 20s, greeted us kindly. "New around here?" "Yeah, we just moved in," I replied. "Where are you staying?" "That house across the creek, you know? The one a bit tucked in at the bend." She paused, just for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. "Ah, that one. So, your family with the owners?" "Yeah, we're their nieces." She didn't say anything else after that, but I noticed it. Her face shifted. Just a little. Like she wanted to say more, but thought better of it. We paid and left. On the way back, we passed the same house where the lady had greeted us earlier. Now, a few other women had joined her on the porch. They were chatting and laughing together when one of them suddenly called out to us, "Girls, come over here for a minute. You're not in a rush, are you?" "Not really, ma'am. What's up?" my sister asked. "Come sit. Don't just stand there," she said while moving a seat closer for us. We sat down. They offered us some tea and traditional snacks. Everything felt friendly at first, but the way they were looking at us, it was subtle but unmistakable, like they were watching closely. Measuring units. Then one of them asked, "How long have you been staying in that house?" "Just about a week," my sister answered while glancing at me. I nodded slightly. "You girls liking it so far?" "Yeah, it's peaceful. Everyone's been nice," I replied. "That's good. That's good to hear," one of them said, but her tone had changed. It was quieter now, more cautious. I raised an eyebrow. "Why do you ask, ma'am? Is there something wrong with the house?" Before she could answer, one of the other women nudged her elbow, almost like a silent warning. "Oh no, dear. Nothing at all. Just making sure you're settling in, that's all." Heh heh heh. We smiled politely and thanked them before heading back. "Thanks again, ma'am," my sister waved. That night, everything seemed normal again, but their words, their faces, kept echoing in my mind. It was like they knew something. Something we didn't. Something about that house. The house beside the creek. And later that week, we found out exactly what they meant. After what happened at the store and that strange conversation with the neighbors, everything seemed okay for a while. We were starting to get used to the house. The village felt peaceful, quiet, safe. But that peace only existed during the day. At night, things felt different. It was our 7th night in the house. I had just finished washing the dishes. My younger sibling was already in the room doing homework. It was around 9:15 p.m. I sat in the living room, scrolling through my phone, trying to feel sleepy. Then I heard something, a scratching sound, like nails against the wall. It was coming from the outside. At least, I hoped it was. At first, I thought it was just a cat or maybe a rat, but it kept going. It wasn't a quick scuffle. It dragged on, slow and deliberate, almost like claws. The sound seemed to move closer. I followed it, trying to trace where it came from. It led me to the wall connected to the locked room, the one room that always stayed shut. I leaned in and pressed my ear against the door. Nothing. But when I turned to leave, I heard it again, this time from the window behind me. A soft tapping sound. I quickly went back into the bedroom and shut the door. My sibling looked up from their notebook and asked, "What was that?" I shook my head. "Nothing. Just finish your work." But that night, I couldn't sleep. The next night, it got worse. This time, my sibling heard it too. "Did you hear that?" they whispered. I nodded. "Try to sleep. Maybe it's just an animal." But we both knew it wasn't. Every night after that, the scratching returned. Sometimes there were knocks, sometimes faint footsteps above us, but always around the same time, just past midnight. We stopped talking about it. We just prayed quietly and tried to ignore it. Then came the 8th night. We were exhausted, not just from fear, but from a whole week of barely sleeping. We decided to go to bed early, hoping maybe it would help. We turned off the lights by 8. I woke up around 11 p.m. The room felt colder than usual. Then I heard a soft sobbing sound. I turned to look and saw my sibling crying in their sleep. Silent tears streamed down their cheeks, but their eyes were wide open. I reached over to shake them, but the moment I touched their shoulder, my body froze. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was completely paralyzed. My siblings slowly sat up. Their eyes were locked on the ceiling, completely still. Their face twisted in fear. I forced myself to follow their gaze, and up there, on the ceiling, there was a massive black shadow, floating, staring down at us. From outside the house I heard laughter, a woman's laughter, faint but sharp. It was followed by loud scratching sounds like something clawing at the walls from every direction. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move, I couldn't even blink. Then, suddenly, the pressure lifted. I gasped and pulled my sibling into my arms. They finally blinked and started sobbing harder. "That thing was in the room, wasn't it?" they said. I didn't answer. I just held them and tried not to let them see how scared I really was. A few minutes passed. The house went quiet again. I helped them drink some water. Then I stepped out of the room to grab a refill from the kitchen. As I returned to the bedroom, I heard it. A wet, grunting noise, low and slow. It was coming from the locked room. It sounded like a pig, but not quite. It was distorted. "Office." My sibling peeked out from behind me. "It's making that sound again." I couldn't let them see me hesitate. I walked up to the locked door, heart pounding in my chest. Then I kicked it, hard. "If you're real, come out! Stop hiding!" I yelled. Silence. No more grunting, no movement. The door didn't budge. It stayed locked tight. But I felt something behind that door, listening. The next morning, we woke up late. It was Sunday. We tried to act normal, like nothing had happened. As we walked down the road to buy vegetables, we ran into a local guy who jogs every morning. He stopped when he saw us. "Hey, are you guys okay?" he asked. "Yeah, why?" He looked unsure. "It's just, this morning, around 5, I saw something." "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then looked at our roof. "I saw something up there," he said quietly. "But, never mind, just be careful, okay?" He walked away, leaving us in silence. We didn't ask what he saw. We didn't want to know. I want to share something that happened to me about a year ago. It's the kind of story that still sends chills down my spine whenever I think about it. And no, I'm not the kind of person who jumps to conclusions or believes in ghosts. At least I wasn't. After I landed a job at a shipping warehouse in Depok, I decided to move out of my parents' house in Jakarta. The commute was killing me, 2 to 3 hours stuck in traffic every day. I couldn't afford anything fancy, so I started looking for a cheap room close to the warehouse. After a short search, I found a boarding house down a quiet side street. It wasn't luxurious, but it had what I needed: a private room, decent Wi-Fi, free water and electricity, and most importantly, it was within walking distance to work. The rent was about 700,000 rupiah per month. Dirt cheap. I went to check the place out in the afternoon. The landlady was a quiet, middle-aged woman, polite but a bit distant. She showed me a room on the second floor. It was small but clean, and right outside the room was a shared sink and a large mirror mounted above it. For some reason, the mirror unsettled me the moment I saw it. I couldn't explain why, but something about it felt off. Still, I needed the room, and I wasn't about to let a weird feeling about a mirror stop me from moving in. The first week went by without incident. I went to work, came home, ate dinner, slept. Everything was normal. But during the second week, something changed. It was around 11 p.m. I usually fell asleep by 10, but that night, I just couldn't. I was restless, like something was keeping me awake. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, then decided to head out and grab some snacks from the corner store to kill time. My room was upstairs, so I stepped out and walked toward the staircase. To get there, I had to pass the sink with that big mirror. The hallway was dead silent, unnaturally quiet. No humming of fans, no sounds of other tenants, just nothing. As I approached the sink, I got this sudden urge to look into the mirror. Not just glance at it, but really look. And that's when everything started. The air got heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my own tired reflection. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move behind me. Just a flicker, fast, like a shadow darting past. I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty hallway. I turned back to the mirror and saw her, standing right behind me. She had long, disheveled black hair and pale skin that looked almost blue in the dim light. But the most horrifying thing, what made my stomach twist, was her mouth. It was split, torn open from cheek to cheek like someone had taken a knife and carved a smile way too wide. She stared at me through the mirror. I froze. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. I was paralyzed, staring at this impossible figure standing inches behind me, her head slightly tilted, eyes locked on mine. Then she started to speak, except it wasn't a normal voice. It was low, almost like chanting. And to my horror, I realized she was reciting something I recognized, a prayer. Ayat Kursi. I tried to join in, but my voice trembled. I barely remembered the words. Hers, though, hers were perfect, fluent, clear, mocking. And then she smiled wider and started to laugh. It wasn't a loud laugh. It was soft, high-pitched, and completely unhinged. Her body didn't move, just her mouth stretching unnaturally wide and that sickening laugh echoing inside my skull. She began to move forward, not walking, gliding toward me. That was the last thing I remember. I must have passed out, because the next thing I knew, someone was shaking me awake. It was around 2 a.m. One of the other tenants, a guy named Artie, had just gotten home from a night shift. He found me unconscious on the floor in front of the sink. I was drenched in sweat and shaking. When I told him what I saw, he didn't look surprised. In fact, he sighed and said, "So, you saw her too?" Then he told me the story. Years ago, a college student used to live in the boarding house. She had an abusive boyfriend who would show up unannounced, scream at her, and threaten her. One night, he followed her back to the room, and they got into a huge argument. Nobody really knows what happened next, but the next morning, she was found dead. Murdered. He had strangled her to death and, according to police reports, mutilated her face. They said her mouth was sliced open from one side to the other. They found her body stuffed inside the janitor's closet next to the sink, right where I'd seen her. After that, tenants started reporting strange things: shadowy figures in mirrors, whispers in the hallway, even the sound of someone crying in the middle of the night. But the worst was always the mirror. People claimed they'd see a girl standing behind them, only to turn around and find nothing there. Some moved out, others stayed, mostly because I never thought a night at the hospital would change how I see death forever. This happened a few months ago. One of my cousins had been hospitalized with dengue. He was recovering well, but his mom needed a break that evening, so I was asked to take her place and stay overnight at the hospital. It was around 5 p.m. when I arrived. The hospital was a little too quiet for that time of day. The lobby smelled like antiseptic and something older, a mix of cleaning chemicals and sickness. The fluorescent lights flickered once as I passed reception. I didn't think much of it. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. The doors slid open, but just as I was about to step in, I froze. A group of doctors and nurses walked out, pushing a stretcher. They didn't acknowledge me, just moved quickly, their faces grim. On that stretcher was a body, a corpse. The face wasn't covered. Only the lower half of her body was. I could see her clearly, a woman, pale, still. Her long black hair was slightly messy, her lips parted just a bit, and her eyes were wide open, not in a natural way. They were fixed open, staring, glassy and lifeless, but somehow full of accusation or confusion. I don't know. All I knew was that I couldn't look away, and I felt watched. I stood there like an idiot until they passed and the elevator doors closed behind them. I took a deep breath, trying to shake it off. I told myself she was just a body, a person who had passed, nothing more. I went up to my cousin's room and tried to forget. He was still awake, watching something on his phone. We talked a bit, joked around. Eventually, he got tired and fell asleep. By then, the strange feeling had faded. I felt almost normal again, until later that night. Around 8:30 p.m., I decided to go downstairs to get food. I hadn't eaten anything since lunch. I stepped into the hallway. The lights were dimmer now, and the entire floor felt still, like the hospital was holding its breath. I didn't want to admit it, but being in that quiet place alone started to make me uneasy. I walked to the same elevator and pressed the button. The doors opened. Inside was a woman. She was wearing a hospital gown, faded, wrinkled. Her long hair covered part of her face. She was barefoot, standing in the far corner of the elevator. She didn't look at me. She didn't say anything, just stood there. I figured she was a patient. Maybe she wanted to go to another floor to smoke or something. I stepped in and stood on the opposite side. I gave her space. I didn't think too much of it, but the moment the doors closed, I felt it. Something was wrong. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was suddenly underwater. I'm not someone who claims to be psychic or spiritual, but I've always been sensitive. I can tell when something's off, and everything inside that elevator felt off. The lights overhead buzzed slightly. The elevator moved slowly. Too slowly, and she didn't move at all. Not even a shift in weight, no sound, no breathing. I stared at the floor numbers as they ticked down. My chest felt tight. Then, for some reason, I glanced to the side, toward the metal panel that lined the elevator wall. It reflected just enough for me to catch her image. She was staring at me, not just facing me, staring. Her head tilted slightly, her mouth was open just a bit, and her eyes were black. I don't mean dark, I mean black. No whites, no pupils, just black. I quickly turned forward again. My pulse was racing. I told myself not to panic. Then I heard her, a whisper, soft but clear. "You saw my corpse, didn't you?" I froze. She leaned closer and said again, "I'm being buried tomorrow morning." Before I could even move, the elevator dinged and the doors opened. I ran. I didn't care how crazy I looked. I just ran straight out of the hospital building. Outside, I stood there, shaking, trying to catch my breath, trying to process what I had just heard. "You saw my corpse, didn't you? I'm being buried tomorrow morning." I remembered the woman on the stretcher earlier, the one with the open eyes. Was it the same person? It had to be. The hair, the gown, the expression. I didn't go back inside for at least 20 minutes. I waited until more people came into the lobby. When I felt safe enough, I went back up to my cousin's room using the stairs. The next morning, I asked one of the nurses something I probably shouldn't have. I said, "Was there a woman who passed away here yesterday evening?" She looked up from her chart and said, "Yes. Around 5 p.m. Room 407. Her family was with her. She passed quietly." I asked one more thing. "Is she being buried today?" The nurse nodded. "This morning, around 10, her family requested an early service." I didn't say anything else. I just nodded and walked away. But I knew. I had seen her. Alive, number dead. And somehow, she saw me too. The rest of my stay was quiet. My cousin got better and was discharged 2 days later. I tried to put the whole thing behind me, but it wasn't over. A few nights later, I was in my apartment building, heading up to my unit. I was alone. I pressed the button, got in, and just before the doors closed, the sensor beeped, like someone had stepped in, but no one was there. Still, the elevator doors opened again. I waited, looked around. Still no one. The doors closed again, and the elevator began to move. And just before I reached my floor, I felt something behind me. Breath, not wind. Breath. Warm, close. And then a voice, the same whisper. "You saw my corpse, didn't you?" My body went ice cold. I rushed out as soon as the doors opened. Since then, it hasn't happened again. But I haven't forgotten. I used to think ghosts only haunted the places they died in. But now I believe if a soul refuses to rest, it follows the last person it saw. Maybe she wasn't ready to go. Maybe she just wanted to be acknowledged. Maybe she chose me. I still ride elevators, but I never stand near the mirror, and I never, ever take the last ride alone.